Howdy. And welcome to the George Bush Presidential Library Center. I'm David Jones, the CEO of the Library Foundation, and it's my honor to welcome you tonight to this Scowcroft Institute event featuring two extraordinary public servants, Ambassador John Negroponte and Dr. Stephen Krasner.
So if you think about the history of American foreign policy, basically for the first 150 years from the founding of the Republic until the First World War, we basically followed a policy which was insular, inward-looking, focused on commercial activity, not at all focused on transforming the rest of the world. So if you look at this, once we emerged out of the Second World War, the lesson that American policymakers, basically the American political elite, drew from the Second World War was that isolationism and what had happened in the interwar period was a fundamental mistake. And the United States created what we've now come to call the liberal international order. We had a series of international alliances. We supported international organizations. We put the UN in New York City. We intervened to oppose the spread of communism, both explicitly in Korea and Vietnam and implicitly in a large number of other countries. If you look at the contemporary environment, though, I think it's whether or not it's as dangerous as the environment which we confronted when we were dealing with the Soviet Union isn't obvious. But one thing that's clear is that there is a very high level of complexity and uncertainty in the international environment. And the uncertainty arises both from our assessment of the intentions of other countries and from their capabilities. Think back to what the world would have been like in 1910, and then look at what happened over the next 90 or so years. So here are, this idea of black swans is a term that was developed by a man named Taleb. It was talking about the financial crisis. But these are basically events which are highly consequential, low probability, and where we really don't know what the underlying probability is. This is Donald Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns, things we haven't even thought about. My anxiety about the current administration is not so much about its policies, many of which I endorse, and I think actually make a tremendous amount of sense. What worries me is a situation in which we have a black swan event, and exactly how will the White House react to such an event?
Good evening, everybody. I spoke here in 1999 once. That's the previous time I was here, and I know that I'm supposed to start out by saying howdy. Is that okay? There we go. So I got positive feedback from my audience already. When I think of the international order, I guess the first thing I think of is the 30 Years' War, which ended with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, and the Westphalian order, the order of nation states that undertook to respect each other's sovereignty and not interfere with each other's internal affairs. And some form or other of the Westphalian order has continued to this very day. I mean, we are now an international community of some 195 member states of the United Nations some day. The next thing that comes to my mind is the relative peace that prevailed in the 19th century, which came in the wake of the Congress of Vienna and what was then called the Concert of Europe. The major powers of that era who balanced each other off and maintained a semblance of international order until 1914. So I think if there's a concern about unraveling, probably the most important concern is the fear that we will abandon our leadership, we will abdicate our leadership role, thereby encouraging the forces of disorder and decline, or perhaps even encouraging the creation of an order led by others in a way less congenial to our interests.